We're live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 95 of Bank to the Future Live. We've got a special interview episode today, and I'm here with Alex, who's the CEO of Amber, and we're going to be discussing all things Bitcoin because they have built an app that makes buying Bitcoin easy. Still something that is very challenging if you want a dollar cost average every single month. But we're also going to be diving deep into the philosophy around Bitcoin and covering other topics as well, so that we can get an insight into why Alex actually founded this company, which I think is one of the most important things when you're making investments in companies, because at the end of the day, anyone can build technology, but it's the team behind it that makes these things succeed. So just before we jump in, I'm just going to cover a few of the Bank to the Future updates, and then we'll jump straight in with Alex. So firstly, if you'd like to get any of your questions answered, then you can head over to sli.do and enter in the box hashtag BF95. Or you can just simply scan that QR code in front of you. Maybe you want to listen in for a bit and then ask your questions, or you can upvote other people's questions. And there's no account needed in order to do that. And so that's the first thing. In terms of a few updates before we jump into the main topic and main interview and go through your questions. For those Coinbase investors, that we released a video yesterday on how to claim your IPO shares, and all companies, obviously we've got a flurry of IPOs coming up, whether that be Ripple Labs, whether that be Kraken, whether that be Robinhood, whether that be Circle, and some of the others. Then we created a video to help you understand the new innovation that we've been building in order to be able to take your Coinbase shares and even trade them in for Bitcoin, stablecoin, whatever you want to do. So there's a video on that yesterday. Also, if you're an investor in Exodus and you're looking to claim your 150x 8x paper return, we posted an update about chatting with the Exodus team and how to deliver that security token to those of you that invested in the seed round. And a few other updates. Bitwage went live on the Bank to the Future platform. Unfortunately, if you haven't invested in now, they had to close early, sold out at over $2 million. Uno Coin had to close early, sold out when that went live. Recap had to close early, that sold out. And Abra is currently in overfunding after making allocation available to the Bank to the Future investors. And of course, we've had Amber that has raised over $1 million, I believe, so far in the first few days, and only a little bit left for those that fancy a play into making Bitcoin dollar cost averaging and all sorts of other applications of getting into Bitcoin a lot easier. Two new pitches coming before we take the pitch break. Remember, on October the 10th, we've got a very important update to meet our new regulatory requirements, in line with the fact that we have now secured our virtual asset service provider registration and applying for additional securities licenses, which means that we've got to update our user experience on the 10th of October. So all pitches will be expired by that 10th of October, and then we'll be going through the pitch quiet phase while we migrate over to Bank to the Future Identity version 2. Now that we're not just offering securities, you can also trade virtual assets, purchase securities, and also set up your retirement plans with us. In terms of what's coming next, we've got the online coaching program 2 for retirement plan B coming out in November. Many people have been asking, over 20,000 on the waiting list. And our second round of portfolio builders, building retirement plans centered around Bitcoin. We've got our first 10 beta customers that have invested approximately $1.2 million into the beta, and we'll be opening up to the next 100 customers probably in November. And then the big update on October the 10th. And so obviously retirement plan B, one of the big goals and missions was to give people easy ways of getting exposure to Bitcoin. And that segues into the interview that we're going to do right now. So sorry you had to go through the updates, Alex, but we got to update our investors on all the important things before we go live for the interview. So why don't you give us a quick update on, for those of you that may not have seen some of your interviews, you've been on the Pomp podcast, and many people say that you got to get this guy on. He really understands Bitcoin. So why don't you just give a bit of background on how you got into Bitcoin, your philosophy, and how you got to founding Amber.
Hold on, I'm on mute, so that might help. I'm a brilliant technologist. This is why I'm in. This is why I'm building a.
Awesome. I actually thought I just did that whole intro on my own, and there was no one in there. Cool. We are live, and you're on mute, but you're not on mute. I can hear you well now.
It's all good. So first of all, congrats on all the success. Well done. Sounds like there's been a lot of stuff happening at Bank to the Future. So well done. Glad to be a part of this. I appreciate the kind words. I guess background for me. I was an early gold silver bug. So I always tell people like little brief intro here. And I traded the 2007, 2008 markets as a young dumb kid in university while I was doing engineering. And I remember running between engineering classes back when we had 100 hours of internet per month as an allocation. And I was, one of the first online trading programs in Australia, and I was trading options and warrants, and I made a bunch of money, turned my scholarship money. I 10x'd my scholarship money in 2007. And then towards the end of 2007, I lost everything. And then I managed to dig myself into, a ridiculous amount of debt. I think my plan was to be a millionaire by the time I was 20, and I ended up being $250,000 in debt, which was hilarious. And that sort of led me down the rabbit hole to say, well, what's wrong with this world? Like, what's this QE stuff? And as I dug, then I discovered people like, Doug Casey and Max Kaiser and Gerald Celente and Mark Faber and, all those sort of that group of people, your Mike Maloney's, et cetera. And I became a total gold silver bug, a little bit of sort of a rudimentary understanding of Austrian economics, I'd say. And, somewhere along the line, me and my brother did very well out of gold and silver. And I remember I think I saw Max Kaiser, who's a good friend of mine these days, just jumping up and down on a couch, yelling at people to buy Bitcoin. I'm like, what crack is on Max? What crack is Max on these days? I was like, yeah, whatever. So I kind of ignored Bitcoin, and I didn't really sort of come back on my radar until 2016. I went and built a bunch of different businesses, in the hospitality industry, and built some software things. And yeah, there was a period of my life in 2016 where I was out searching for something new. And this degenerate friend of mine who was just like this, he was a junkie basically. And, he was saying, oh man, my friend made a bunch of money out of Bitcoin. But I was like, just slow down. I said, what are you talking about? He's like, man, he took 10 grand and he made $1 million. And I was like, how? And he's like, Bitcoin, man, Bitcoin. And I was like, fuck, is that thing still around? So, I took some time out to sort of start digging. And, all of those seeds that had been planted over the years for me, like a distrust in the government, because I'd lost a bunch of money previously in sort of my mid-20s. I made my first $1 million in a renewable energies business, and the government, meddled into rebates and all this sort of shit. And they completely destroyed the industry. They fucked everyone over. And, I lost a bunch of money there. I worked my ass off for 3 years, only to see the government kind of change the rules at the end and say, oh, look, sorry, we ran out of rebate money. So yep, we'll pay you 50 cents on the dollar kind of thing. So that was kind of painful. So I had this sort of distrust in there. I had this, the seed planted around, gold, silver, and, the manipulation of markets. I've always been sort of, an entrepreneur and a bit of a renegade. And, that sort of piece about Bitcoin appealed to me. And back then, sort of 2016, there wasn't too much good content. There was Pierre Richard, Mike Goldstein, and Antonopoulos was good back then. So I started digesting this stuff. And, what quickly happened was, I got this meme that I say these days is I came for the money, but I stayed for the money. So I came to make some quick money. I thought, yeah, this will be a good way to make some money. But I stayed for the revolution that Bitcoin represents, which is a fundamentally superior and, I would argue, perfect form of money. Bitcoin represents energy money, which is something I believe all sentient species need to discover before they turn the world into a gulag, or before they blow themselves up, or before a freaking asteroid hits them. So unless we can map the mechanism via which we measure human action, energy, time, and resources to to reality, we will be lying to ourselves. And it's kind of like the fiat monetary system is like flying a plane with no instruments, or with fake instruments, basically. Like, the mountain's coming, and the instrument is, instead of telling you to pull up, the instrument is giving you a smiley face. And that's what the sort of the fiat world is today. Whereas the Bitcoin plane is a plane with the real instruments, and it tells you when you're doing something stupid because you have direct feedback. And if you're doing something good, you compound your wealth. So that's the power of having like a fundamentally, a money that is fixed in supply, that is incorruptible, that nobody, no entity, no group, nobody can mess with. So that dawned on me, in a big way. So obviously I then sat down and said, what can I do? Like I was running around like a madman in 2016, 2017, telling everyone, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. And, I'd get the usual look like, what's this idiot on? And the questions I would generally get is like, how, where, how much, how do I do it? Like all this sort of stuff. And it was still like, to this day, it's still a nightmare, but back then it was, an extraordinary nightmare. Like I remember buying my first Bitcoin with a brown paper bag full of cash, thinking I was going to get the shit beaten out of me. So, I set out to build Amber, and, the first incarnation of it was more like a roundup app, kind of like Acorns. It would, round up your spare change. But what we found that people, didn't really like that, because we needed too much insight into their bank account, and they were already a little bit iffy about Bitcoin. They're like, why am I giving this guy so much, insight into the bank account? So we kind of ended up throwing that out, and we really just went with this, like a really simple, streamlined, download the app, link a direct debit, so we don't need to see inside your account. It's just a straight direct debit out of your account, and dollar cost average into Bitcoin. And, we rolled that out in 2019. And obviously people who started stacking back then did a very good, they've done very well. They were buying Bitcoin all the way through, 6,000, 3,000, 10,000, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, like since then, the app has really matured in Australia. Like it's the easiest, simplest way to buy Bitcoin. You can buy with Apple Pay, Google Pay, credit card, debit card, EFT, Pay ID, direct debit, like the whole lot, right? It's a very rich app, and it's designed for you to basically encourage you to save in Bitcoin. So, we've got the Sats denomination, so you're stacking Sats all the time, and you've still got a fiat account there, so you can withdraw, you can to your dollar account, you can deposit, you can do all that stuff. You can auto withdraw to your Bitcoin account. We've also got some really funky features, like you can auto buy the dip on Amber. So like you can set some parameters, like if Bitcoin falls 4% in 24 hours, buy me this much Bitcoin. So you could be sleeping and it'll buy the dip for you. So that's kind of like our dollar cost averaging on steroids. So we've got these sort of really cool features. We're building one called Buy the Schiff. So every time Peter Schiff tweets about Bitcoin, it'll buy you some Bitcoin, because he's like the ultimate contraindicator. So, we've got all this stuff, but in the last 6 months, we've been thinking, all right, what can we do to like not only just bring this product to other markets? So we're launching in the US next month, but how can we extend the product without turning it into just another shitcoin casino? Like we don't want to just make another trading app. Who cares? It's been done before, whatever. Like that's the last era. For me, the next era is what does Bitcoin represent, and how can we leverage Bitcoin's maturation into a product that provides utility for the next wave of people coming in, who are not going to be traders, who are not going to be, cutting edge, like looking for Web3 or any of that shit. They're going to be like my sister, like my mom, like, my normie friends. Like that's who we're sort of, we're skating to where the puck is going. So yeah, and that's sort of what, the new product lines are going to consist of, primarily treating Bitcoin as pristine collateral, as Michael Saylor might put it, is like, how do we treat Bitcoin as this private property that is not protected from the promise, like by some promise of the state, right? Like if we look at why the West prospered over the last 100 years, is we had really strong property rights. And off the back of those property rights, we were able to draw dollars against the equity, and we were able to either enhance our lifestyle or compound our wealth, right? And the primary private property that we used to do that was real estate. Now you look at the emerging markets, that's non-existent. There's no credit relationships there because there's no private property rights. It's a disaster in the rest of the world. Now it's a disaster in the first world too, but that's another story. So what Bitcoin represents is private property, like true private property, whose promise is delivered by math, not by bureaucrats, and it's accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world. So can we unlock credit relationships with people all around the world against Bitcoin? And that for me is the next big idea. Like if you look at Bitcoin's progression, Silk Road was the first killer app, trading platforms were the second killer app. The next killer app is treating Bitcoin as pristine collateral and being able to unlock purchasing power whilst enabling the saving and the hodling of Bitcoin. And that's really where, our product will, move to next. So like a Bitcoin collateralized, credit card, buy now, pay later relationships, we'll have this idea where you'll be rewarded for spending fiat and you'll be rewarded for saving Bitcoin. So all this sorts of bits and pieces, which make the app like a really cohesive, what we're kind of calling a Bitcoin super app is like, you don't need all this other garbage. You just, you've got your Bitcoin, you've got your dollars. If you need to interact with the old system, you can, but you've also got Bitcoin. You have a Lightning wallet. You can interact with the new system. You save in Bitcoin, you spend in, shitcoin, dollars. And that's kind of the piece that we're doing. And I think we've got a beautiful foundation for it. And, the future is bright. So anyway, I've rambled on long enough, but that's my history. That's why Amber. That's what we are. That's where we're going.
Nice. So full disclosure, I have invested. I do hold some Amber equity, just like everyone else on Bank to the Future that may have invested in this round. And that's done through my retirement plan. But what I love here and what you're telling me is it looks like you are trying to figure out a way of almost gamifying or making it simple, the good behavior in terms of what is the best practices being involved in this industry. So having been involved in, with Bitcoin over a decade now, we have seen people that were involved right from the beginning that have been involved in the highest performing asset class in history, and through hacks, through various other things, through over trading, through degenerate gambling and all sorts of different behaviors, some people have found themselves in not even a better situation despite being involved in the highest performing asset class in history, which is a very soul destroying thing. But as long as you learn from that, and one of the important things that I think is that, I think we're philosophically aligned that we are still at the beginning. And so even if you weren't involved throughout that decade, it's a lot easier today than it was back then. It was so much easier to lose your Bitcoin back then. It was so much harder to, have integrations with card payments or banking or whatever it may be. Just getting money and offboarding onto fiat has really improved significantly by orders of magnitude over the last decade. So, now is the time. And, I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts on how you designed some of these different, behaviors that it seems like you can do by using the Amber app. So, one of the first things is really, we've always tried to help people understand that 90% of traders lose money, 10% make money. In a bull market, everyone thinks they're a genius trader. So then they start over leveraging, and then they end up losing everything and ending up with no Bitcoin. I've seen that thousands of times over the years. And inevitably you end up at the whole dollar cost averaging concept of, well, forget about pricing, just buy and let the market do its thing. So help us understand some of the behaviors and user experiences that you've developed into the app to try and reward this interesting behaviors.
Yeah, so I'll do it as a bit of a narrative. So like you said, most people, they basically wreck themselves, and I think you're being generous saying 90% of traders lose money and 10%. 90% lose, 10% win. I think it's more like 99-1. I think the distribution is far more skewed. And I mean, I know from my experience, like I did options courses, like I my background is math and stuff. So when I really focused on trading, I was actually quite good. But the problem is, like, over the years, I look at the amount of time and energy I spent being an idiot trading traditional markets. Like I was always in derivatives, I was always in options and warrants. And like there was periods like I made ridiculous returns, but then I would slowly like lose it all from like, instead of one big cut, like, cut by 1,000 sort of slashes, right? Death by 1,000 cuts, right? And that's what would happen. So like, in the gold and silver run, well, sorry, let's look at it 3 phases. So 2007, I turned my $5,000 scholarship into 60 grand in like a space of 2 months. Thought I was a genius. And then, over the next year and a half, I lost everything and went into debt. Then I worked my ass off, built a business, made all the money back, paid off all my debt, built up enough of a capital base. And I then got into gold and silver, and it did well. I turned 30 grand into almost $500,000. I thought I was a genius. And then I spent the next 5 years shorting the market, losing everything that I made in gold and silver like a moron. And then, then had to, rebuild everything again. And all I had to do, Simon, was I just had to take $10 a week and put it into Amazon. Like, let's say I didn't even discover Bitcoin. I mean, Amazon was $35 at the base of 2008. That's all I had to do. I didn't have to outsmart the market. I didn't have to spend time like stressing out, like fucking sitting there watching charts and like wondering what the hell is going on. Like the amount, like when I think about how stupid trading has become, and I actually think this is a function of like the disease of the fiat world, is that people are incentivized to go and do shit just to keep up with inflation, just to keep up with the Joneses, just to like try to beat the system in some way, which is fundamentally rigged against them. Like when they could go out and actually add some value, they could build some software, they could become an engineer, they could be an artist, they could do something valuable in the world. They're sitting there like degenerates trying to like, stress out and, draw fucking patterns on a chart just to win. When, hey, you find something that is fundamentally different, that is a 0 to 1 moment. This is what Bitcoin represents. And just, shut up and put some money aside into it every week. Don't worry about it. Go actually do something useful with your life that you enjoy. I don't think anyone really enjoys staring at a computer and watching charts all day. I mean, maybe a small subset of humanity does. And a great example is actually my sister. So she's a 25-year-old girl. She's a professional dancer. She's sort of like into art and all that sort of stuff. She has no idea about investing or saving or anything, right? Like she's always got like, I call it more month at the end of the money, right? Like she doesn't know how to save properly. Like, it doesn't work for her. Luckily, 3 years ago, I convinced her to start. She was one of the first Amber users, and she just put $30 a week aside, and she completely forgot about it. This is how much she checks her bank account, right? And she has like, she's accumulated a decent little stack of Bitcoin. Good on her. But the funny thing is, my brother, he spends 100 hours a week on the stock market, like trading all sorts of derivatives. Like he's all into the quad four and the trading and all this sort of shit. And she has outperformed him 10 times by just fucking dancing and working at a cafe. And he fucking hates it. He's like, yeah, but it's a bubble. It's a Ponzi, and like, I'm like, yeah, whatever, bro. You keep spending your 100 hours a week, bashing your computer and slamming your head against the wall like an idiot just to make your 8% a year. Or your grand, like, I'm making 20% a year, bro. And, she's absolutely decimating you without even knowing. So that's sort of the piece. So anyway, that's the narrative. But like to talk through some of the features, dollar cost
just on that point before you go through the features, we've seen that. So I've seen that so many times. Just bringing it back to even in Bank to the Future. So you talked about Max Kaiser earlier. So Max Kaiser and myself launched a fund called Bitcoin Capital, and we were investing in many of the early stage companies like Kraken and BitPay and others. And we also put a third of it all into mining, and we were paying people out thousands of Bitcoins from Bitcoin Capital. And some people got locked out of their Bank to the Future account and they never bothered to figure out where their 2FA code and all sorts of stuff. Others were just involved in everything in crypto, involved in all of the different movements, all of the different things. But when we look back at those performance, those that were locked out of their accounts performed significantly better than those who were just, following every single new ICO and every single movement and every new coin and all sorts of stuff. And they log back in later and they're like, wow, I didn't even know that I've got this amazing retirement here. So it's just, there's something in our brain that says, we have to, I think it's our desire or need to want to work and earn something and when something happens without work, we think that we feel a bit guilty about that and we need to work harder. And then, and also the other thing, just even focusing on Bitcoin only, because the most common thing that people say, well, to when they find out you're involved in Bitcoin, is they're like, well, what's the next Bitcoin? It's the first question everyone asks. They don't want to buy any Bitcoin. They want to find out what's the next Bitcoin. The price is too high. I can't afford that. So, address some of the features and some of the things that you're doing in Amber app to just try and get people past these just in normal journeys that everyday people go through when they first discover Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I mean, so first of all, like, I guess dollar cost averaging being a staple of like how any normal human being should behave with respect to an emergent asset class, right? Like Bitcoin is emergent. And I mean, people think Bitcoin's at a bull run. And it's like, what I tell people is like, you have not seen a bull run yet. Bitcoin's bull run will begin when we achieve cent sat parity, when 1 cent equals 1 sat. And then when people are no longer trading the Bitcoin price, when they're trading the Satoshi to cent price, that's when you'll actually see the bull run begin. Because like, just to sort of blow people's minds, think of it this way. When 1 sat moves from 1 cent to 2 cents to 3 and 4 cents, that sounds like, okay, that's a good move. Like, I made 200%, 300%. Think about what actually happened with the Bitcoin price. It went from 1 million to 2 million to 3 to 4 million. I guarantee you this decade, Bitcoin will move from 1 cent to 2 cents. So 1 cent Satoshi will move from 1 cent to 2 cents in a day. It'll happen in a fucking day, or whether it's like from 6 cents to 7 cents, whatever the case is, it'll happen inside a day. Bitcoin will move $1 million inside a day because people will not be buying fucking.
Just before you do that, I can hear the lawyers and the compliance team. We can't offer guarantees, unfortunately. Do your own research, not financial advice, not tax advice, not any of that. Bitcoin can fail and all that stuff. So Alex's opinions. So just doing that for the lawyers that are probably watching this right now.
Sure.
Carry on. We get the point.
So that's when Bitcoin's bull run really starts. So what we're trying to do with the app is like, the standard denomination in the app is sats. Like when you look at it, you don't see, how much Bitcoin you hold, you see how many Satoshis you hold. And that feels a lot better, automatically. Like people's unit bias is kind of like solved with that. When you make a purchase of $50 or $100 and you've bought 210,000 sats, feels a lot better, right? And that's sort of what we try and help people sort of do in the app is like you're stacking sats, you're accumulating your Satoshi balance, because the idea here is as Bitcoin wins, Bitcoin gets to cent sat parity, then gets to dollar sat parity, etc. And that's really what you're trying to accumulate. And then we look at, all right, what other behaviors is like people say, well, look, dollar cost averaging is kind of blind. You don't know when it's being purchased. Like, everyone wants to buy the dip, for example. So we thought, shit, can we automate buying the dip? And we're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we can do that. So we built basically, I mean, what's effectively a bot, but it's so easy to use in the app. It's like 3 clicks. It's like I'm going to see, I wonder if I can actually show it to you on here. Like, I don't know if the screen's going to be nice enough, but I'm going to try and show people like literally what this baby looks like on here. So how are we doing with like screen, or is it too
yeah, Zod, can you see that? I'm having some issues seeing my screen at the moment. Can you see? I can't actually see what you're seeing at the moment.
Maybe if I do it this
just
way.
about, it's not that clear.
Okay, so let's try. So see, you can kind of see like the Bitcoin balance here is like you've got how many sats you hold, etc. But here's the automations piece. I'm going to try to do this like this. Let me delete the old automation. Is you can actually, so you add an automation, and we're going to do so there's 2 automations at the moment: buy the dip and sell the pump. So you start to set that up. So this is as easy as it is. So you got like, if this occurs, and then you sort of select you got a little screen here, which is, a little bar here, which says if Bitcoin falls this percent. So I'm going to select 5%. In a period of time, which is the next one, so 12 hours, 24, whatever. And it gives you kind of like a back test here at the bottom to show you whether that's realistic, because you might select, okay, if Bitcoin falls, 24% in 12 hours, well, guess what? Back test tells you that hasn't happened in the last couple, epochs, buddy. So you might want to change your parameters. So 4%. So that's like literally set your parameters. Next, so if this, then that, which is now, how much Bitcoin do you want to buy? So $200, for example, or let's just go 50 because I don't have enough in the account at the moment. And you create the trigger. So that's your thing. Done. So now you can go to sleep. You can do whatever the hell you want to do. You can be out in a mountain somewhere, hiking. You can be working. You can be with your wife, your kids, your family, whatever. And this thing will go and buy you the damn dip when it happens. And that, like, for me, is like what I call dollar cost averaging on steroids. And that's where we also want to like gamify other features, like I said before, like buy the Schiff. So you'll be able to set an amount, like every time Peter Schiff tweets about Bitcoin, buy me $10 or $50 or whatever you want to do. So we want to like gamify, as we said, sort of accumulating Bitcoin. But there's also some other things where we want to reward people. So when we build out like the Amber Earn component of the app, you'll get like, the normal, when people think about Amber Earn, they're going to think sats back, like for purchases, which yes, you will get, like what Fold Card does. But we're going to sort of take it a step further, which is want to reward the behavior around accumulating Bitcoin. So you might jump on the app and say, look, I want to accumulate 20 million sats over the next 6 months. And if you set that goal, we'll give you a bonus of like, say, 20,000 sats or 30,000 sats for achieving that goal. And if you go ahead and achieve that goal, we'll reward you because, we're earning some fees on what you're doing. And instead of giving you a discount in just, the fees, what we'll do is for you being consistent, we'll reward you in sats for doing the right behavior. Or it could be rewarding you, like if you buy Bitcoin every single day this month, here's an extra 50,000 sats just on the house for you. So I think that kind of, mechanism for rewarding the right behavior is really important. And I don't see that in any fucking application anywhere. In fact, what I see is in the Binances and the shitcoin casinos of the world, the incentive is for you to trade more. And I think, like me personally, philosophically and ethically speaking, I think that's the wrong thing to do. I think people need to be saving. Saving has become a dirty word. And it's like, in my mind, like, think about what Bitcoin actually represents, like, with my MAGA hat on, is like Bitcoin makes savings great again. Like that's the slogan. That's what it does, because, the world and civilization cannot exist unless we have savings. And what has the Federal Reserve and the fiat system done? It's disincentivized saving, it's skewed time preference, and it's fundamentally destroying the capital base that we've spent thousands of years building. Whereas Bitcoin changes that, it lowers the time preference and it re-incentivizes saving. And we want to be in line with that because that's the ultimate trend here. Everything else is a fad. So anyway, that's sort of our mechanism for enabling that behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about this many times over the years, but, spending fiat is the right behavior. Taking on debt is the right behavior in the fiat world, where your money is going to be worth less in the future because, it's going to be diluted away. And the opposite is true in the Bitcoin world, where those that have spent their Bitcoin punish the greatest, and those that have saved their Bitcoin, it has a reward mechanism. And so your philosophy of spending fiat and saving Bitcoin and rewarding that behavior is really, really great. So it's not just an app for buying Bitcoin. It's really helping people understand really some of the economics and investment philosophies by actually, rather than having to teach them, just actually building them into the app, which I love.
Action over words. Action over words. So for sure.
Yeah. So then moving on to the collateral side. So collateral is, inevitably when you're saving your Bitcoin and people are generating a wealth effect, and people then start to want to do things. The innovation that has come over the years is being able to lock up your Bitcoin and collateralize. Obviously, one of the downsides is that you could end up accidentally having to sell your Bitcoin on a margin call or something like that. But you can unlock some of the value, the fiat value, or the bit. So tell us how your collateral service, you're intending that to work.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different services these days, and a lot of them kind of run around and say, hey, look, we promise that the Bitcoin is not being rehypothecated. And, that's like a really empty promise in most cases. I think the guys who are doing it the best in the world is Unchained Capital. By far, I don't think there is a better company doing Bitcoin collateralized loans than they are, because you can see your Bitcoin there in a multi-signature address. Like, it's visible, it's not rehypothecated. You hold one key, Unchained holds the other key, and Citadel SPV holds the third key. So we want to emulate that, do it in a sensible way. But see, the difference between our product and Unchained's product is Unchained is like more for the larger end of town. Like, I think their minimum loan is 50 grand or whatever. So for us, we want to do it for the smaller end of town, and we want to kind of treat it as like a revolving credit line, and obviously issue a card against it. So that way you can sort of do it sensibly and do it with smaller amounts. So we might even start with like a higher collateralization ratio than normal. So we might start with a 3-to-1 ratio. And then, as you develop a relationship and, better repayment schedule, then, you can get down to 2.5-to-1, maybe 2-to-1, etc. So, again, like, we don't want to limit people's capacity to access fiat as and when they need it, but we sort of want to, put some, how can I say, like, training wheels on, so that when they start, they don't just jump on and wreck themselves, which is what most people do, right, when it comes to leverage. So that's important for us. But yeah, again, we'll take the approach very similar to what Unchained is doing, by making sure that the Bitcoin is there. You can see it. It's in a multi-sig address. There's like, Nick Carter talks about this a lot as proof of reserves. So, we will aim to do it in a mechanism that is, that proves the reserves, that your Bitcoin is not being used somewhere, and there's some sort of black swan systemic risk in what we're doing, where someone that we're lending your freaking Bitcoin out to on the back end accidentally gets wrecked, and then we're like, oh, oops, sorry, we don't have your Bitcoin anymore. Like that would be a nightmare situation. So we don't want to go down that path. I think there's going to be, as like, in the same way as the last era, as I was saying before, like, you had Silk Road, you had trading apps, and now we're sort of moving into Bitcoin as pristine collateral. So the credit applications of this are going to be interesting. The same way as you had a lot of exchanges blow up in the beginning, like, we're at the early stages of this sort of new revolution of Bitcoin, like using it as collateral. My guess is that a lot of those players are going to blow up in the coming years, from just the inherent volatility of Bitcoin as an emerging asset. And we don't want to be one of those people. So we're going to be conservative from the beginning. And hey, that might mean our interest rate might be a little bit higher, but this comes down to the person: is do you want to save 1 or 2% and risk 100% of your Bitcoin, or do you want to know that your Bitcoin is secured, because that is your long-term wealth, and do you want to just be more sensible about what you're spending it on? So that's really going to be our approach. And yeah, it's not going to be for everybody, but hey, there's no such thing as a product for everybody. There's a product for specific marketplaces, and sensibility and longevity is, a big part of our core ethos and mission. So, we'll abide by that.
Okay. So I got 2 tougher questions on the company, and then we'll hand it over to the investors and Azad. If you're just tuning in right now, you can ask your questions at sli.do and enter hashtag BF95. Or you can just scan the QR code that Azad will pull up, and you can upvote other people's questions, or you can ask your own questions there. So 2 of the important things when it comes to any or financial technology company. Oh, my screen's come back on now, so I can actually see you. I was speaking to a wall. That's good.
I'm better looking than the wall, I promise.
Yeah, definitely. Although this is a very good looking wall we got here.
All right.
The banking and regulations, and sorry to do the swear words. So dollar cost averaging, I found it, and working, whenever you deal with international payments, it becomes a nightmare. When you're dealing within the local banking system, there's all sorts of interesting innovations within the banking system of a local environment. But then when you try and do this on a global scale, you end up inevitably having to bolt together these different systems that really don't work well together, don't work nicely. So are you set up better for particular countries than other countries? And how are you thinking about this?
Yeah, so we're fundamentally set up way better in Australia, for example, than we will be when we launch in America next month. I mean, I'm Australian. I've lived there all my life. I know I was in fintech prior to just, doing Amber stuff. So I deeply understand the Australian payments and financial network. So it is a superior experience. The app will have a superior experience in Australia. And I think it'll almost always have a superior experience in Australia because Australia just is fundamentally better in terms of fiat rails than anywhere else I've seen in the world. It's better than Europe. It's better than America. It's better than everywhere. The UK is not too bad, but I would still argue Australia is better than just about anywhere. So that on-ramping experience is going to vary country to country, but that's just what we've got to do. And as with every other bloody crypto companies, we're going to end up with a series of subsidiaries all over the place that have to have local banking relationships, etc., to enable the onboarding piece. And so be it. This is part of what I call the wastage of the fiat system. Is we've got to do all of this stupidity just to perform the same function in different countries. And these countries are just imaginary borders that some idiot bureaucrats have drawn and decided to do differently, right? It's so mindless. And this is, again, why Bitcoin is so important. Things like the Lightning Network, et cetera, are so important because they standardize money globally and doesn't recognize border, time, jurisdiction, nationality, or any of that shit. So yes, we will have to deal with this stuff. I mean, this is part of why we're raising some extra capital, is like, we've got this beautiful foundation, we've got the tech stack. Now, part of this money is going to be allocated towards dealing with the stupidity of the setups and the regulatory, hurdles that we need to jump in new countries. Like, if that stuff didn't exist, we would already be a global company. We've done all the hard work. We built the app. It all works. If this dumbness didn't exist, we would be global right now. So it's part of what this raises towards. And yeah, it's just the necessary evil we'll have to deal with. And I think I'll also be very strategic about how we do that. Is like, the deal we structured in America allows us to launch across 44 states instantly and without too much regulatory burden. So I've partnered with sendwire.com in San Francisco, and that allows us to get access very quickly without too much headache that some other people have gone through. And so I'll be very strategic about how we allocate our resources. Like, if I go to one region and they say, oh, you have to write War and Peace and do all this crap and blah, blah, blah. Like, for example, New York, I will not go to New York. I don't care what anyone says. I'm not paying the bit license, millions of dollars just for the privilege of New York allowing me to operate the app there. I'll go somewhere else where our business is wanted. So that's kind of an example of how I'll approach it. Like, I'm not in the business of making regulators rich. We're going to, really go where it makes the most sense. And, as we grow, as we dominate, we'll get to the point where someone like New York is begging us to come because they're all broke and have no more money left because they're part of the legacy financial system.
Okay, and that brings us to the final question before we go into the Q&A, and I think you answered it in part. Are you taking the approach that partnering with regulated companies to facilitate this, or do you have any particular regulatory license stance you're going to be going for?
So yeah, initially it'll be partnership focused because that allows you to scale quicker. And then what that allows you to do is sort of enter a region and see if there's appetite. I mean, we might think that, yeah, America's the next best market and, the best thing since sliced bread. And we go in there and, we get 3 users and, we sort of do the same in Brazil and all of a sudden we got 100 million users. It's like, obviously we'll double down on getting our own licensing and building our own infrastructure in Brazil. Like, in Australia at the moment, we own the entire stack. Like, we own the technology stack, the licensing stack, the regulation, like the whole thing. So we're not dependent on anybody else in Australia. Like, it's all ours. Whereas as we go into new markets, we'll partner first, test the thing, see how much traction there is, and then we'll double down on where we are, where there's the most traction, where we're most wanted. So it's basically an equation. Like, where do we get traction? What's the regulatory burden? What's the cost and how long does it take? Like, each will get a score and then we'll decide what is next for us to kind of put the resources there.
Yeah. So what's the regulatory situation of the company in Australia?
We're Australian incorporated entity. We're registered with Austrac. So all of the boxes are ticked. We've got a bank account. We've got multiple bank accounts actually. And, we're just set and stable and functional in Australia. So we can't use that registration obviously in Australia to launch anywhere else. but we're able to use that registration for relationships with like liquidity partners and things like that. So that's useful, but that, serves the Australian jurisdiction specifically. And yeah, that's all done and dusted.
Okay. All right, Azad, let's open it up to other questions. We've taken 45 minutes, we've got 15 minutes to get as many questions in as we can.
Let's do it. So is Azad going to read this, or should I read them out and answer them?
I'll read it out. You can answer it. Okay, first question is, I don't get DCA. If you have a lump sum and it's a bull market, or if the purchasing power of the cash is decreasing, then it doesn't make sense to DCA. What would you do with the money that's otherwise uninvested or worse invested? Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess this is why like the app has DCA and you can instant purchase. It doesn't matter. Like, so, that's kind of viewer discretion or user discretion. It's like do whatever you want. Like, we just recommend DCAing because, whether it's bull market, bear market, you don't actually know. You might think but depending on your level of scale, right? Like that'll define the bull market. Like if you go to a quarterly chart on Bitcoin or a yearly chart, Bitcoin's never been in a bear market. Like it's been in a bull market the whole time. But if you kind of zoom in further to like a monthly chart or a weekly chart, then you can see periods of bear market, in which case, DCA makes a whole lot of sense. But, then if you zoom in further, like to the hourly chart, like, Bitcoin has arguably been in a bear market for the last month. So it really kind of, bull and bear is a subjective thing. It's a magnification thing. And, the DCA piece is more about peace of mind than about timing the market. But that's also why we have like auto buy the dip is, if you think that, I think we've run it. I think we did a back test with this to see whether the same amount of money DCA'd blindly every week versus buying the dip every week. And buy the dip did beat DCA. So that's a good sign. But, it's impossible for you personally to be on all the time so you can time the dip. And that's where, like, if you can automate some of these things, it makes the experience better. But hey, if you've got a good opportunity to buy some Bitcoin and stack it, then go hard. Like, if you've got a tax return or a bonus from work and you get Bitcoin and you understand it and you want to buy a bunch of sats. And I do that often myself as well. Like what last tax return that I got, I panic bought like, 60% of it. And then I put the rest of the 40% on just DCA. So that's my answer.
Yeah, there's an assumption in the question that the market. No one knows the market.
Correct. Yeah. So what's next?
Next question is, Amber seems to be Australia only and coming soon in the US. What about the rest of the world and of course the UK?
Yep. So this is I'm already speaking to a couple providers like that'll be partners similar to Wire in the US that will be able to roll out in the UK and Europe relatively quickly. So that'll be after the US. Like the important thing is that each time we roll into a new jurisdiction, we just want to make sure it's stable, functional, working, and it's kind of like a little engine humming away, and then we'll go to the next one. And for me at the moment, I'm doing an evaluation on whether partnering with these guys in Europe, UK first, or I've also got a partner for Brazil and Mexico. So, part of me wants to like really go emerging nations because there's, obviously larger population, they're in a greater need for Bitcoin, but people have less money there. So I don't know, whilst, Europe and UK generally have more money, but, there's a bit more competition. So I'm kind of evaluating the differences now, but definitely off the back of the US, we want to keep just, adding to this world map puzzle, and we'll want to get it to as many places as possible.
I think the second question, the next question is similar. Can the app be used now worldwide?
So the answer to that is answered previously. No, you can. This is the problem with what me and Simon were discussing earlier is the fiat rails and the capacity to move dollars onto a product like ours is limited by the stupidity of the fiat network and how limiting that is. So it's a pain. The app could technically be available everywhere, but functionally not, because you just can't send money to us in all these different jurisdictions. So we'll solve this problem step by step as we roll out new locations.
Okay, Flawless Victory has asked, how do I get around accredited investors status to invest in Bank to the Future from the US? The restriction is bollocks.
Well, I think this is a question for Simon.
Yeah, I'll answer that one. So if you are a US investor, then you have to go speak to the SEC and say, can you remove the accredited investor requirement to invest in private equity, because the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer? And if they tell you that they can, and they knock on Bank to the Future store and say that it's okay, then we'll open it up to you. But we have to operate within the confines of the law, whatever we we like it or not. So that's the rule for US investors. There are some exemptions around that, like Reg A Plus and Reg A CF, but it means that the company would need to do the equivalent of a public offering, watered down. And sometimes the companies just aren't ready. We've got a whole world of investors that are looking to invest. And to have to do quarterly reports to the SEC and all that type of stuff is sometimes a stretch too far for an early stage company. So it's the law, and we have to abide by those laws. They're not, we don't write them, we have to comply with them, though.
Yeah, don't worry. Bitcoin fixes this on a long enough timescale.
Okay, well, the next one is just a statement. Sounds great. Best of luck. Wish I'd known about DCA services way back in 2011, 2012.
Yeah, well, wish I had too, but I don't think they existed back then anyway. So like, this is why, like DCA is like genuinely going to get the next, $10 trillion into Bitcoin, and or products like ours, I guess. So more than just standard DCA, but like gamifying the accumulation process. This is kind of like, I used to call us a DCA app. Now I call us like an automated accumulation product, because it's not just DCA, like, order by the dip, by the shift, like all these other things that we want to do. That the outcome is accumulating Bitcoin, and this is how we get the next 10 trillion into Bitcoin. And when we really start, as I said, to see a bull run, and not just like, Bitcoin to $1 trillion is not a bull run. Like it's a nice little beginning. The bull run has not started yet.
Okay, we've got one more final question. So we've got about 8 minutes left. For those of you who want to ask a question, just scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter BF95. You don't need to register or anything, just submit your question. So we got our final question is, will you keep investors who invest via Bank to the Future funding round, via this Bank to the Future funding round, updated on company progress? A lot of other Bank to the Future portfolio companies struggle in this area.
Yeah, so we do a quarterly update on the business, and I've sort of been known to like do these War and Peace like quarterly updates. Like they're really long, and we go through team and traction and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know, I was speaking with a private investor that's coming into the round separately to Bank to the Future yesterday, and he was like, "Look, man, just make them shorter, and that way you don't have to stress out so much, and maybe you can do them more frequently." So I think at this stage I'm still willing to just like stick with quarterly, because that's a good update cadence. Like spamming people every month with a new email about, hey, we've got some new users or whatever is can get annoying, and it's also just an extra burden on me as the operator of the business, when I should be going out there and building product. But updates are important, and quarterly at minimum. And if we can do better, if we've got like interesting announcements, like we're launching the UK next month or whatever, by all means we'll be dropping that in here. And yeah, it'll be just the copy and paste process for me to what goes out to my email, like to our direct investors, will go into the updates here on BF as well.
Yeah, I love this question, because this is one of the biggest problems at Bank to the Future is the founders being too busy to post investor updates, feeling upset that they're not getting those updates. And so you heard here a commitment to a quarterly update, and just to support you in that process. We do have a private investor zone. So anybody at the moment, we have, when you look at a company on Bank to the Future, you have you have a company page, you have a pitch page, and then you have a discussion forum and an investor zone. The discussion forum is during the funding process. You can ask questions there to any member that may not have invested yet. Or if Amber ends up going on the secondary market in the future, is where publicly available information can be discussed. But once the pitch is actually closed, there's a private investor zone, and that investor zone is just where the company can post updates for the investors in the SPV that we set up in order to invest in that company. So please do copy and paste every quarter. It's already hit its funding goal, so this is actually we've hit the minimum goal. And there's a bit more left in order to meet the full allocation and capacity. So this deal is going ahead.
Yeah, I would say that there's also in the background, like this week, I've closed another bunch of private deals, which I'm passing over to you guys. So that'll fill up most of this. So my guess is there's maybe another 100 grand left in this. I'm going live with Max Kaiser tomorrow, with Mark Moss, and then with Pump next week. So like this thing is going to fill and overfill very, very quickly in the next week. So that's just my 2 cents with some background information.
Okay, well, and that's our biggest problem at Bank to the Future right now, is that we just don't have enough allocation for the investor demand. So, that's great that you gave the warning of what's coming up. Okay, Izad, was that the last question?
We've got 2 more interesting questions, and that will be it. But I think at this point, maybe you want to, Simon, if you want to sort of give a shout out to those who are new to this channel, and just to hit like and subscribe. Also about the premium and premium plus members, the advantages there, unless you've already mentioned it.
No, I think you did so give us a like if you like this. We're always trying to get more content out there, whether it be people that are wanting to understand more about the products like Amber, but also people that are looking to build portfolios and retirement plans and invest in the industry. Do your likes help. Your shares help, your subscribes help. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell symbol, hit all, and YouTube will notify you each and every time, so you miss less deals. If you want to be a priority member, then you have many of the deals don't even go live on the platform because they sell out in the first 48 hours, and that's to our premium members. And our premium members, you can get more details in our email, but when you log in, it talks about the membership. And our premium members get 48 hours priority access to all deals sometimes we never go live because the premium members subscribe to everything. Okay, let's take the last 2 questions. Okay,
current number of users.
3 minutes for 2 questions.
Okay, so current number of users of the app. What's the approximate number, and how many users do you envisage in coming years?
Yep, we've got about, I think it's the last time I checked, like 16,000, somewhere around there at the moment. They're all Australia. So as of next month, like the America will be 12x the market size than Australia. So, my hope is that sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, like, we'll be able to at minimum double, but, I can't guess how much appetite there'll be for a product like ours. But, my personal projection is that, we'll do 100,000 users basically in the coming years as we unlock the US and some of these new markets, whether it's like Brazil, Mexico, Europe, UK, or all of them. I think there's a large enough pool there. And this is sort of where I say Amber's like at a really nice Goldilocks zone at the moment, is that we're still small. We've got a beautiful product, which I would argue is like one of the best apps in the world, if not the best Bitcoin accumulation app in the world. But it's only been released to 20 million people in Australia. So like when we come to these, sorry about the noise. So when we come to these new markets, which are 10, 20, 30 times the size, I think we've got huge upside potential from here.
And the final question is, what's your comparative advantages, disadvantages over similar apps like Abra or others?
So I think we sort of discussed this throughout the whole show, but really I would say the Bitcoin only focus is really, really important. Like we have tested literally side by side with people like the Abra app versus Amber app. Abra is way more confusing than Amber, for example, because Amber is simple. It's like, 3 clicks and you've bought Bitcoin. You're not confused by a million other things in there. It's not cluttered. It's not full of stuff. Like, simplicity is the way to get to mass market. Like, adding complexity to a product is counter to mass markets. So that's really important. That also, from an operational and security standpoint, makes us superior. Like, we don't have to deal with 1,000,001 different coins and things and bits and pieces in there to ensure that what we're doing is 100% secure. So like, we hold 100% of our Bitcoin in cold storage that is multi-sigged. That's very difficult to do when you have 10 million coins or all sorts of other different asset classes. And then it gives us the space to really build up the stack on Bitcoin. So we can use Bitcoin as collateral. We can treat, we can do Lightning stuff. We can do multi-signature stuff. We can do interesting collaborative custody. We can do all sorts of things that when you're focused on Bitcoin, it doesn't clutter the app, but it also gives us the space to build richness and depth instead of shallow breadth. Like, there's a very different approach there. So I think that's sort of advantages, disadvantages. And I mean, check out the app if you can download it. Ideally, you're in Australia or next month in the US, and you'll see the difference. That doesn't count all the gamification and the auto buy the dips and all that sort of stuff, which I think, again, our product has space for, whereas products that are more designed for trading in 1 million asset classes just don't have the space where it's too confusing.
Okay, I think we're out of time. So Alex, thank you very much. Congratulations on your success on Bank to the Future. I don't even think you've let your new users know, have you yet? We haven't even mailed the users. So it looks like it's going to be pretty fierce competition.
We've got to do that.
Last allocation.
Yeah, we've got to do that. We've got to go out to our socials. We've got to go out to our existing investors. We've got to go out to sort of everyone, basically. So yeah, this next few days, like I said, that stuff coupled with Max Kaiser, with Pomp, with Mark Moss, with a couple other podcasts that I'm on, it's going to be big. So yeah, I'm not trying to just blindly shill anyone, but this is what's coming up. So if you're interested, now would be a good time.
Okay, awesome. So that's everything we got for Bank to the Future Live episode 95. And we look forward to having you back, Alex, as the company progresses. And welcome to the Bank to the Future portfolio companies.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you to all the team. Really appreciate it.
Okay, bye, everybody.